is it in our interest to prevent Iran from becoming some kind of a serious nuclear power? Well, you could go down the list, go to the largest sponsor, state sponsor of terrorism. Of course, there's that choke point next to the Strait of Hormuz. About a quarter of global oil and a fifth of natural gas go through there. 80% of Iranian oil goes to China. There have been alleged assassination attempts and plots on U.S. leaders, including President Trump. Look, here's the thing with Iran. I want to frame this discussion in so that we aren't missing each other and we aren't simply generating an environment where it's going to be never-ending infighting. When people say we used to be able to have civil discussions or disagreements, that's correct. But I've also told you, it's not correct as far as with the left, for example, on abortion. You can't actually have a discussion based on a lie as common ground that, we just have, no, that's a fundamentally different worldview. They believe, the left, abortion up until and including birth on demand, period. Okay, we cannot have what someone might call a productive disagreement on whether children can transition, right? But here's the weird thing to me. You will see people on the right being civil and crossing the aisle to link arms with those people while cannibalizing those in our movement over policy differences, for example, on Iran, that would have historically been within the scope of reason entirely. I think there is a case to be made on both sides here with Iran. I think there have been some missteps. I also acknowledge the threat that Iran is, and I also need to really lay the foundation here for all of the disagreements. Should we do something? Should we not do anything? Why do you think we might engage? One thing that's paramount, there is absolutely no betrayal taking place from Donald Trump if action is taken on Iran. Anyone who voted for Donald Trump and believes that they are being betrayed if he bombs Iran or if he takes military action was an uninformed voter. You need to take accountability for that. You may disagree with them. I have many candidates I voted for, as a matter of fact, every single one with whom I have disagreements, but I accept it. You may have had that with Donald Trump on Iran. But we can go back to 2011, and he has been very, very clear that Iran cannot have a nuke, and he would be strong on Iran. Before he was running for president, he was criticizing Barack Obama's actions on Iran. It's not him doing a 180. You may disagree with his stance. If he were to say, hey, we're going to deport people, or we are going to secure the border, and do the opposite, that would be a betrayal. Donald Trump's bumper sticker, his slogan might as well have been, close the border, no new wars, except Iran can never have a nuke, and I'll do whatever it takes.
That's a long bumper sticker.
That was a good one, though.
But that could have been his entire foreign policy. Like, no new wars, non-interventionism, but Iran we're keeping our eye on. He was super clear about that. So let me tell you where this discussion, I think, can be fruitful and where it can't. First off, Israel and Iran, to me, irrelevant. Of course Israel has a problem with Iran. They have a vested interest in Iran being neutered. I get that. But let's just say Canada had nukes and ballistic missiles aimed at Israel, but they also had some aimed at the United States. That doesn't mean that the United States is fighting a war for Israel if they say, Canada, we have our eyes on your nukes. Two people can hate the same bad actor, and two people can be in a conflict with them, and it doesn't mean that they're acting on each other's behalf. I absolutely agree with anyone who says we should not go to war for the interests of Israel.
Correct.
Okay? We all agree on that. And then we have to ask, okay, outside of that, is there a separate interest that the United States would have in Iran not being a nuclear power or them, frankly, not being a power broker of any kind? Just to be clear, when you hear things like, I get it. In other words, I get it when you hear things like this, Ben Shapiro saying this, it's tone deaf, and it muddies the waters.
I will tell you that everyone else is watching. If the United States backs off of this and cuts some sort of unbelievably weak deal, the consequences will not just be for the Middle East, where Israel will be forced to ramp up its military even more and probably go and attack Iran itself, given Iran's capacity and increasing capacity in both nuclear and ballistic missile development and its renewed attempts to support terrorism.
I'll take framing it the worst way humanly possible for 500, Alex. If we don't do it, then Israel might have to. So you're saying that we should do this so that Israel doesn't. I'm not in agreement with that guy.
Yeah.
Couldn't care less if it was just a conflict with Israel and Iran. So that brings us to point number 2. The United States and Iran. Is it in our interest to prevent Iran from becoming some kind of a serious nuclear power? Well, you could go down the list, go to the largest state sponsor of terrorism. Of course, there's that choke point next to the Strait of Hormuz. About a quarter of global oil and a fifth of natural gas go through there. 80% of Iranian oil goes to China. There have been alleged assassination attempts and plots on U.S. leaders, including President Trump. I would also say that, President Trump put himself on the hook for the protesters, saying that if you guys kill protesters, it's going to be bad for you, which is also why I think the timing right now, this has been poorly executed if something does happen. But it is super important, again, because I see black pillars out there going, this is a huge betrayal. That is not a valid argument. President Trump has been saying since at least 2011. Here's 2011. I believe this is a quote from President Trump, right?
Yes.
America's primary goal with Iran must be to destroy its nuclear ambitions. Let me put them as plainly as I know how. Iran's nuclear program must be stopped by any and all means necessary. Period. We cannot allow this radical regime to acquire a nuclear weapon that they will either use or hand off to terrorists. Okay, so we go. Don't care about Israel and Iran. Does the United States have its own separate conflict with Iran? The answer is yes. Has Donald Trump been consistent as far as a presidential candidate and a president in saying that Iran is a threat? Yes. So the conversation really comes down to one point here. Is it worth it? And what should we do given that? So here's what I think. A very clear case needs to be made to the American people if action is going to be taken on Iran. Good arguments can be made on both sides. Doesn't mean that you're a shill. Let's go through the timeline here as to why this may be escalating right now. I will tell you this. I think Donald Trump backed himself into a corner by saying if you kill protesters, it's not going to be good for you. Yeah. They killed thousands of protesters.
I think that was a good time, too, by the way, as far as how the perception is of what you're doing, how other people look at it, the optics.
Right.
That would have been a great time. And then
to help. Yeah.
You were laying out earlier how.
Yeah. But does that make sense? Let's separate that and go, okay. And this is how we used to have we used to have political discussions, right? This would have been a reasonable discussion for people to say, all right, okay, look, Maduro, all right, now Iran. Are we at a point where something needs to be done? And any bad actor, if you look throughout human history, it really just comes down to an inflection point. It just comes down to, have they gone far enough where it requires someone stepping in? Has Iran? I don't have a definitive answer, and I don't think anybody does because the communication has been bad, but there certainly is a point in time where I think we would all have to acknowledge that. It really just comes down to a judgment call. Have they reached that right now? So on February 19th, President Trump told reporters that Iran had 10 to 15 days to make a deal or very bad things would happen. Keep in mind, this was pre-negotiations, so this was clearly a way to generate leverage.
You said today on Iran, bad things will happen if Iran doesn't make
really bad
a deal.
things.
What will that
I'm not going to talk to you about that.
Okay, can you just know what is the goal if there is a U.S. military
Well, we're
strike?
going to make a deal, or we're going to get a deal one way or the other.
But with a military strike, is it to wipe out their nuclear program?
I'm not going to talk to you about that, but we're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them.
And you said today 10 days. Have you given them a deadline firm to make a deal?
I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
So
pretty clear.
It's not very clear, actually. It's 10 to 15 days, maybe.
No, I mean, it's pretty clear. It's like, the bad things are going to happen if you guys don't make a deal.
He gave him the old Steven Seagal.
Right, yeah. Bad things happen. What, you mean for the buffet?
Hey, come on. The toilet.
Gonna wrist lock the Golden Corral. Now, but this administration has not been super clear on what the goals are, why there may be conflict with Iran. So there were negotiations. Nothing seemed to came from them. Don't take my word for it. Links, references in the description.
But it's difficult to see how the Americans could possibly be satisfied with the outcome of those talks as being detailed to us so far. We saw the Iranian and Omani negotiators basically trying to project this as an optimistic outcome, a breakthrough, but there has been absolute silence from the Americans and the negotiation party there, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. They're a long way from where they wanted to be, which was a complete end to Iran's nuclear program. We know that the US president is today meeting with his key advisors to discuss his options, but here in Israel, analysts are saying it won't be a question of whether America strikes, but what targets they choose.
Yeah, and it seemed like that's imminent because the U.S. Embassy in Israel told staffers to leave. China told its citizens in Iran to evacuate as soon as possible. There are F-22s in Israel for the first time ever. There's been the largest naval buildup in the region since 2003. And those negotiations, so this is where the messaging matters. I think Rubio was more effective. Look, we've discussed enrichment. And that was the primary discussion before. Iran enriching uranium to the point well beyond the need for civilian use. If Iran didn't build a nuke, they would be the first nation to reach 60% uranium enrichment in the history of the world to not build a nuclear weapon. Let me ask you, do you really think that Iran is that much of a stand-up guy that they'd be the first? Or do you go, it's pretty clear why they were enriching uranium?
Another question, do you really think Iran is the kind of place that's developing a nuclear weapon for protection?
Right. That's exactly right.
For defense?
Exactly right.
No.
So yesterday, the negotiations were focused, enrichment, but the other component, ballistic missiles, meaning the ability to deliver the payload.
The negotiations tomorrow and the talks tomorrow will be largely focused on the nuclear program. And we hope progress can be made, because that's the president's preference, to make progress on the diplomatic front. But it's also important to remember that Iran refuses to talk about the ballistic missiles, to us or to anyone. And that's a big problem.
Vice President J.D. Vance reiterated, just like Donald Trump has been saying since at least 2011, Iran can't have the bomb.
The principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically. But of course, the president has other options as well.
And he said the idea that we're going to be in a Middle Eastern war for years with no end in sight, there's no chance that will happen. Here's what I'll say. If that is incorrect, if we end up in a never-ending war in the Middle East, which I think is very unlikely, then J.D. Vance should be held accountable and should get nowhere in a primary. I think that's fair.
I agree, yeah.
I think we need to hold them to their word as far as their communications. I think there's a very big difference between few flyovers or strategic strikes and war. And I think we need to allow for that possibility, because everyone said we were at World War III when we carried out the strike against their enrichment facilities last year. Of course, we're not in World War III. Here are the demands from the United States, and I think they're reasonable. No enrichment, period. No ballistic missiles, period. Iran wants the right, they want to enrich. And they're asking that they get some sanctions relief before talking about missiles, which to me is just
me first,
silly.
and then we'll talk. What?
They want to talk about energy exports. They want to talk about military weapon proliferation. They want to talk about finance, shadow banking, shipping. And they want to talk about mining, manufacturing. They also demanded a live concert from Brooks and or Dunn.
Which one is it? Is that Dunn or Brooks?
I don't know, but they broke up. We can't do that for you, Rand. You got anything else?
Yeah.
We also can't do Simon and or Garfunkel.
Or Crosby, Stills, or Nash.
No. Here's the other thing going on, right? They're the largest funder of state funder of terrorism. You know, Pakistan announced that it's in an open war with the Taliban right now, to be clear. So this is going on. And remember, the Taliban said that they would support Iran if they were fighting against the United States. There's some pretty strong evidence of funding between Iran's Revolutionary Guards and the Taliban. This is a very, very unstable country. There are most countries in that region. So take Israel out of it. Take the United States out of it. Saudi Arabia, plenty of European nations.
The G7 issued a statement on it.
G7, Egypt. At a certain point, you can't just say that everyone is in on some kind of a gag. Iran is not the kind of nation that you want to have any nuclear weapon capabilities, period. It comes down to what do we do about it and how is that being communicated to the American people? This is where this administration falls short. They need to, I've told you guys this, marry every action with a very clear communication. So for example, the communication that was taken, one can come first or the other, depending on the situation. When he said, if they start killing protesters, it's going to be very bad for them. That was the communication. The action should have been married with that communication.
Yeah.
You'd still have people saying that you're in the pockets of Israel, but at least you'd have the reasonable folks in this country understand why. And there were a lot of people who thought that the Iranian revolutionaries deserved some support. Right now, the communication is not being married to the action, so people who aren't paying attention, and even people who are paying attention, may feel as though they are left in the dark. You got to communicate, be clear on your objectives, be in and out. Of course, no Americans on the ground. I think let's find the areas on which we agree. Okay? Number one, Israel has nothing to do with this. We do not act on behalf of Israel, period. And I don't want Israel leading the dance in any way, shape, or form. In other words, if Iran was an ally, they're not, but if they were and Israel had a problem with them, you're on your own, Israel. Do we agree with that?
100%.
Okay. No American boots on the ground.
100%.
Think we all agree on that. Don't try and convince us that you've been consistent on this messaging as far as this administration. Like, own it, be clear about it. You can point back to Donald Trump's position, but be clear as to the actions you are taking and why, and be in and out. I think if we're looking at something like the enrichment facility, if we're looking at something like Maduro, a mission like that, that's something that a lot of Americans can stomach. A war is not. And I think we're seeing a lot of people on the left and the black pillars trying to tell you this is all about war. This is all. Remember we used to get that with George W. Bush? It's war for oil, war for oil. Well, hold on a second. Why would we go to war with Iran? Why would we carry out any military intervention or strikes in Iran if not due to national security interests? Like, what financial interest do we have in it? It doesn't make sense. Let's be honest about this discussion and have a very clear framework as to where we disagree. But you can't even get there right now. Because I don't want my son to die for Israel. Well, no one does. No one does. I think we all agree on that. Donald Trump is betraying us by now. No, he's not. He's been super, super clear. And by the way, if Donald Trump, for example, said, let's say that he had a different stance on Iraq, saying, actually, I want to go in and finish what was started. I would completely disagree with him if that was his platform.
Yeah.
I would have voted for him anyway compared to Kamala Harris, and that would have been a disagreement over which I would try and press the administration and hold them accountable. You may find yourself in that boat with Iran, where you liked Donald Trump's policies on immigration, you liked his policies on deportations, you liked his policies as it related to the economy, maybe tariffs, DOGE, but maybe you didn't like President Trump's policies or his viewpoint that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuke and we would intervene if we felt that they were getting close or the ability to deliver said nuke. It's okay. For example, I don't agree with Donald Trump's stance on abortion in some cases. We wouldn't be completely aligned, but I voted for him anyway. I'm not going to lie and say that he's switching something on me because I knew that when I voted for him. That's something that I see is a pretty consistent issue and is used to lead people astray.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want him to be able to do whatever it takes to make Americans safe. I don't want people to forget the idea that there are dangers in the world that will make us less safe. We don't want to use that as cover to go do something that we've done in the past that hasn't worked to great effect. I get that. I understand why people are hesitant, but it doesn't mean that doesn't exist. Lane made a great point earlier. He said, put Iran with a nuclear weapon and think about North Korea. All the actions that they take, what they do, right? We can't touch them, right? Because they have nukes.
Right.
If you give that to Iran, Iran's not just sitting there passively kind of doing their thing in a corner. They're actively trying to subvert not only Israel, but other players. And they would then have a nuclear weapon and we would not really be able to touch them the same way that we can right now to keep them from doing it.
Well, Iran would be actively trying to destabilize energy globally, to be clear. And Iran is buddying up more and more with China and Russia. This is something like,
they want to kill Israel and they want to kill us.
Yeah, we're big Satan
for a long time.
They said it.
Yeah, I don't agree with everything Senator Huckabee says in his interview with Tucker Carlson. But he's not wrong on that because we have the videos of them chanting it.
Yeah, but I would just even eliminate Israel from the conversation.
Yeah,
I don't even bring them up. They're irrelevant to me in this conversation.
They want to kill us.
I don't care.
That argument when they say we're fighting for, we're just doing this for Israel. We're just fighting on behalf of Israel.
Yeah.
They called them little Satan. They called us big Satan. That's like if somebody called.
Just forget that.
It's like if somebody called Stephen, little faggot, and called me big faggot.
Yeah.
I'd still want to fight that guy. It has nothing to do with Stephen being a faggot.
No. Well, Gerald did that this morning.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Did he really?
Yeah, but
I didn't hear him say that.
No, but he's giant faggot, so it's okay.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm little faggot. You're big faggot. He's giant faggot.
How did that work? Huh.
What do you?
Because you're giant.
No, it makes sense
you
to me.
mean the height charts?
No,
Like what?
I didn't
do you
say how
large
does
person.
this work? I mean, how does it work? that
You
I
saw
thought
Stephen's
were
pose
messing with
earlier?
Josh,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
now it's on me.
So is there any? What do you look? Let's open this up quick to a roundtable. What do you think? Would you think that something should be done?
What do I think we should do? Or
Here's what I think. You have the arranging, and then you tell me. I think we're kind of all on the same page because this is a complicated issue. They cannot get to the point where they could have the enriched uranium to build a nuke. All right, that's one component. The other component is to have the kind of missiles that could deliver that payload. All right. Whichever one comes first does need to be stopped because then you're just inches away from it being a significant threat.
yeah,
And I certainly understand that is Donald Trump's stance. It has been that stance since before he ever announced running for president.
I'm going to take a page out of Warren Smith's book. He was on the show earlier this week or last week. But he was saying, sometimes, it seems, silly to argue something to me too, that I don't know all the details about. Yeah. And I don't know all the details. I mean, we can't know all the details. I don't know what Jared Kushner, by the way, I don't know if that's our best negotiator. I don't know why he's always negotiating on behalf of our, he gets us, he gets $1 million planes and stuff. No, yeah, I guess I don't know, some nepotism going on there, but I don't know all the details of all these negotiations. Yeah. I don't know what is actually happening in Iran. I don't know what's being said at the negotiation table. I don't know what's being denied. I don't know how we're handling. I don't know all the details. So for me, it's like, well, I'm kind of be, hard pressed to give an opinion before it happens until, after it happens. If we learn all the details, like, oh yeah, well that was a good move.
Right. I think it's important too, really important for you to not make your decisions or form your opinion being completely emotionally charged. And that's what that's what I see as far as the bad actors on the right. Put it this way. Remember, there was a point where we believed that Iran was behind the assassination plot of Donald Trump, or one of them. Let's say that when that happened, definitively, we were able to prove, hey, Iran was behind this. And then then Donald Trump said, I'm going to make them pay, believe me. I'm the only thing between them and you. And then he bombed the hell out of them. I bet you a lot more of you would have understood it and supported it.
Yeah.
Well, they have been behind assassination plots. You just haven't married that narrative, that communication with the action, right? Slaughtering their own people in the streets. Mm-hmm. Then you add biggest state funder of terrorism, destabilizing energy across the globe, an alliance with Russia and China, right? If you add those things up, but if you put yourself back in that emotional state, you would understand it. Now people want to put you in the opposite emotional state, going, Iran's no threat, and you're going to see your children in the military die for Israel.
That's the thing is, no matter how you look at it, Iran is a threat.
Yes.
I mean, not just to us, not just to Israel.
Yeah.
It is a global threat. It's a threat to Western civilization, for sure. That's not even arguable.
Right.
To its own people.
I mean, whether you make a decision to operate inside their boundaries based on that is a different thing, but you have to establish that they are a threat to the rest of the world, at least the Western world.
Yeah. And I do think that, unfortunately, that this is all kind of marred by, look, the statement that Ben Shapiro made is incredibly corrosive.
Yeah.
There are people out there who do seemingly care about Israel more than the United States. I get it. That's a problem. I'm not saying that he does, but it comes across that way. When you say, if the United States doesn't, then my God, Israel might have to fight their own conflicts. That's what he is saying.
It's not the first time a clip like that has made the face of the right-wing movement. It's
right.
Like, hey. That's one guy with a last name that sounds like that's his opinion, but that's not how all of us feel.
Right. Yeah. So you end up with these voices going, hey, if we don't do it, then Israel's going to have to defend themselves. And then people going, see, this whole administration is paid off by the Israeli government. So, well, hold on, let's put those two aside. Do we live in a world, do you honestly live in a world where you believe that there is no nation that could present as a threat to the United States, regardless of their relationships with other nations?
Right.
Like, That's a fantasy world.
It doesn't make sense at all. And
That's a liberal view of the world. That's not a practical, that's not a logical view of the world. But these voices are awful, and it's time for them to kind of either understand the damage they have caused or go away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my answer to this is that a negotiated settlement is the absolute best possible outcome if you have a reliable, trustworthy partner on the other side that will be transparent. I don't think that has ever been this Iranian regime since we've had an agreement with them. And that was my problem with the one that Dave always cites. He's like, but we had a deal with them under Obama. Yeah, that was an issue because it had sunset provisions. And why would you go to 60 anyway?
Right.
My problem with where they are right now is that Iran is doing the very thing that they say that they're not doing. We don't want nukes, but we're going to 60%. Nobody's ever done that before. You've gone too far for me. If you were at 20% enrichment or 15 and you go to like a medical kind of isotope enrichment level where you stay right around there, that's a different story. But when you go to 60, you're basically saying, we're doing this to keep you away. Well, I can't know the difference now.
Right.
That is now a problem that I have to solve. And I feel like this is a problem that will have to be solved one way or the other now or later. It is not going to go away.
No, it's not.
It will just end with them either getting a nuclear weapon, at which point the calculus changes in the region completely, not just for us, but for everybody else, or we change this regime.
Yeah.
And it would have to be us in some form or fashion with the Iranian civilians rising up against their own people. I just don't know how that happens. And I don't want American boots on the ground for any of it.
A regime change doesn't happen without boots on the ground.
I know. And
they might not be boots that you ever hear or see, but it does not happen without boots on the ground.
The only thing I would argue, it perhaps could have happened while the revolution was in full swing with some strategic strikes where we could have given them the ability to. And I think that was, if we were going to do it, that would have been the time to do it. I think.
Don't the Jews have space lasers? Can't they just point one of those puppies back down at Tehran somewhere?
Yeah, can't you just point a Cuban microwave at them?
Yeah, it's kind of like War of the Worlds. You just kind of like, poof.
Yeah. Oh, you're still here? And you're still watching this on YouTube? You've probably noticed something is missing by now. I'm not here. That's because the Live Daily Show is now streaming exclusively on Rumble weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Tune in there, where nothing is censored.